Hey everybody, welcome back. I know it's been a while, but I've moved. I've got a new setup here, so bear with me as I come back to making some videos. But today I've got a new one, and it's about custom code in Webflow. So I know some of you may have experience adding some custom code to your Webflow project, and you might be building out a cool Buzz Lightyear themed website like this. You might be breezing along, adding some custom code. Okay, obviously all this code is not for this website. This is a pretty basic looking website. Sorry, not everything can look as good as animated Chris Evans. But say you're adding all these cool custom interactions and styling, and then you get this dreaded message here. No! No! So Webflow only allows 10,000 characters of custom code, and this is not based on your pricing plan or the hosting plan of that particular project. This is just site-wide. That's as much as you can put into your project. So how do we get around this limit? Well, it just takes a few steps and one line of code in your project, so let's walk through it together. So the easiest way I found in order to add more than 10,000 characters to your project is by using a CDN, or a content delivery network. So this acts as a middleman between your Webflow project and then an exterior source that holds all of your JavaScript, CSS, whatever kind of files you want to incorporate. And the CDN will just be a script tag that lives in your Webflow project, and it basically pulls in all of that code into your project. So you go from 10,000 plus lines of code in your Webflow to just that one line, and then you can pull everything in separately. So there are a few different CDNs, all with different power and capability, but the one that I use is called JsDelivr, and it's a free and open source network, and you only need one line of code, and they've got a bunch of different configurations depending on what you're using this for, but we're just going to go right here to the GitHub version and copy this first line here. And now when I head over to my Webflow project, all you have to do is paste that into the settings of the page that you're targeting. So in this case, I'm just targeting this one page. Since this is a JavaScript, it looks something like this. So I have that script tag, so it pulls in something, and the source of that is going to be that content delivery network there. And now this page will look to this for additional styling or effects or whatever. But if you need this to affect multiple pages on your site, all you would do is, instead of putting it there, you would go to the project settings overall, head to the custom code here, and you could put it right in there instead, and that way the whole site will have access to this rather than just one individual page. So just do whatever is more appropriate for your project. But for this project, we're going to just target this one page, so I'll keep everything living in here. And I'm going to leave this as is for now, but we'll have to reconfigure this path a little bit once we have our other part in place. So I'll go ahead and save that. Now, the next step will be to build out a GitHub repository. So if you're not familiar, GitHub is a version control tool that lets developers keep track of code files and where they can pull or push changes, collaborate with other people, lots of powerful stuff. So we're going to use this to hold all the code that can't fit in Webflow. So once you create an account, just go and add a new repository here. Now a repository is almost just like a big project folder, and that's where all the code for that project will live. So I'm just going to go ahead and name this Lightyear. It could be public. You don't need to change any of this at all. So I'll just hit create repository, and there we go. So I'm not going to go into the details of a bunch of GitHub because it's not the point of the video here. So the first thing we could do is add a new file here, upload an existing file, and we're just going to need to create that file. So let's say that I go to a code editor here, and if you're adding just some simple CSS. So maybe let's just try to change the color of this text externally, right? Make sure I can target the ID of this, or the class name. So right here its ID is summary, and I can also just call this summary if you prefer to use class names. So now in our editor, let's create a new file, and I would just save this really quick, and I'll call it Lightyear styles.css. So now it's a CSS file, and if I just want to change the color of that paragraph text, I'll just do summary to target the ID, and maybe let's make it green instead of that white color. So now that we actually have a file to use, I'll just upload this to GitHub. I'll hit commit changes, and there we go. And now in here you'll see it's just simple. It's just one little line to affect the color. So back in Webflow, all we have to do is edit the path of that content delivery network just to point to that file within our repository. And before I showed you an example of a script tag, that would be for JavaScript, but since we're working with CSS, it would be a style tag instead. So the proper formatting for that would be a link tag. The relationship is a style sheet. The type is important. This is going to be text or CSS, so it knows what actual kind of content it's pulling in. And then the link to that style sheet will be our link for the CDN. It's called JsDelivr.net/GitHub. And then this is where we can change our actual text to match our path name in GitHub. So we've got GitHub. This is my username, Cullen K. And now it just follows this kind of breadcrumb trail here. So Cullen K/Lightyear, and then the file that you want, which is lightyearstyles.css. So it's going to be capital Lightyear, and then the file name is lightyearstyles.css. And it's a self-closing link tag, so it closes right there. So that lives right in our body tag. Now remember, because we targeted the ID of summary and changed the color to green, it won't do anything on its own, but once it's in Webflow, it'll look for something with an ID of summary, which is our paragraph, and then change the color of that. So now that that's in place, I can save this. And remember that the code in here won't reflect in the editor, so we have to publish our site to see those changes reflected. So now when we go to a live site and I refresh this, you'll see, boom, it's green. So there is nothing in Webflow that's telling this text to be green, but rather instead the text is being pulled from that GitHub style sheet here, and it'll change it to green. So now you can see, instead of having thousands of lines of code within Webflow, targeting styles and effects and all these things in here, and then eventually you'd hit a limit, we can just define all these things within a repository in GitHub, and then pull those style sheets into here, and reduce the amount of code lines that we're using. And say I have different pages, or I have different files that I want to pull from, all you would do is just copy this down, and you just change the path name to reflect the different files that you're targeting. And it might be a link for a CSS file, it might be a type of a script file instead. So just be mindful of what type of file and code you're trying to pull in. So you'll see that all the styling that I have in Webflow defined are still present here, but it will just also reflect any changes that are being pulled in from an external style sheet. So I've got my Webflow styling, and I have the external ones here. Just be mindful though that the external sheet will take precedence over the native Webflow ones. So if I actually change this color of this to something else, maybe I make it red, and then I publish this, the paragraph is defined as red within Webflow, but you'll see once I'm in the live version, it still remains green. So just remember that anything you're pulling in will override anything that's native here. So one weird quirk or bug that I have noticed with the CDN approach is that you can't make changes to the file externally and have them automatically just reflect in Webflow. The only way I can get around this is by changing the file name itself. So I think this is an issue with the text type or the type of the file that it's inputting. You're not allowed to make changes to it. So unless you change the file name itself, then it will reflect the changes, but unfortunately it doesn't happen automatically. Let me show you what I mean. So let's say that I go back to my file and I change this to purple. So now I want my text to be purple. I'll save that. And now when I go back to GitHub, I can come in here, I can delete this. Now there are easier ways to push and pull changes to files, but this isn't a GitHub video, so I won't show you how to do that. Instead, I'll just add a new file in here. So now you'll see I have a new style sheet, and this is the one with the purple coloring instead. So you'd think that since we didn't change anything here, Webflow is still just pulling from this file, right? The path name doesn't change, the file is still called Lightyear Styles, but now it's purple, right? So you'd think, okay, great. So when I publish this again, or if I just refresh the page even, it should just change to purple. But you'll see it doesn't. It's still green. But green is not even defined anywhere. That's the old version that we deleted. So this is a little bit of a tricky behavior. I'm pretty sure it's because of the type, text, and CSS. You're not allowed to change that from an incoming source. So it's just a little frustrating that you can't just quickly make changes and have them reflect inside your Webflow project. So the workaround that I found for this is that you have to just change how the source is coming in. And the way to do that I found is just saving it as the new version, really, right? So let's say we make this Lightyear Styles v2. So now, when I go to GitHub, I can delete this file. I'll say, yes, I want to delete this. And now, okay, I'm going to upload a new file. So now I've uploaded Lightyear Styles v2, which is the purple. And now when I go back into Webflow, I'll go here, And all I have to do is change this path name so it pulls in the new name of the file that we just made. So it's Lightyear Styles v2. Save this, publish it again, and now when I refresh, you'll see that it's purple. So I thought it was because of some caching behavior, maybe the website remembers, but I think it's because of the text type that's coming in. So it's a little tedious. I'm sure there are other ways around this. I'm no expert on it. If you know anything, definitely let me know in the comments below if you can help other people out too. Because when you're working on a client project and it's a lot of files, say there's little tweaks, JavaScript bugs, and you're just changing a typo, a letter, a missing semicolon, you have to change the file name every time and re-upload it to GitHub. And that's what I was doing, and it gets very tedious. I quickly was on V50, V60, V100 for different projects, depending on how much custom code there was. But it does work, and it does allow you to have more than 10,000 lines of code that you're pulling into your website. So not perfect, but it definitely works. So that's how I got around the 10,000 character limit within Webflow. If you have been working on projects and tried to add a bunch of custom code for a client or something, then you know that this is a big limitation and could potentially prevent you from continuing work on a project. So hopefully this presents another option for you. So feel free to use this method in your next project to take it to the next level, or better yet, to infinity and beyond.